Good morning and welcome to Fox 29's News Now on this Wednesday morning. We're going to get started with some local news for you this morning as the Philadelphia area is slated for a dangerously hot Wednesday with temperatures reaching a high of 96 degrees. And an excessive heat watch, or warning rather, is in effect from today through Sunday evening. Fox 29's Steve Keeley filed this report.
Even before the sun came up, the temperature and humidity were already up, both above 80. And so that made it tough on those up early themselves, hoping to get their daily exercise in during the best conditions for it. And then as it got later and hotter and the sun came up, it got more crowded here at Cooper River Park, with some not recommended attire, like wearing a knit hat for the winter and gloves, and 2 hooded sweatshirts at the same time. That's what Manuel Mercado was wearing, who told us he likes a good sweat.
I like hot inside, because this is our grass house.
You're not too hot with the hat and gloves on and the hood?
Yeah, but this I like him.
Also here early, 82-year-old Clifford Miller, among those most vulnerable, being above 75 years old. He drives here from Lawnside every day and says he wasn't going to miss his workout, a brisk 2-mile walk. He's not going to miss it today or any other coming days either. The key, he says, is getting out here and done before the hottest time of the day, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. How do you feel afterward? I see you're sweating.
Good. It worked up a good sweat.
While you were walking the 2 miles, did you think maybe this wasn't the smartest thing to do, or were you like, all right, this is still good even though it's this hot?
No, I say I have to do this.
If you didn't do this, it would bother you all day, wouldn't it?
Yes, sir, it would.
But you don't feel any signs of heat exhaustion or any of the things that doctors warn about?
No, none.
All right, any advice for folks over 75 like yourself if they're going to be out in this heat?
If you're going to walk, start early in the morning when it's sort of cool. Don't go to the heat of the day, because that's bad for you.
Well, I try to walk out maybe 2 to 3 times a week, though.
And you thought, do it now because the rest of the week's going to be even worse than today.
Yes, we figured we'd get out here early because the heat's coming and we can get our walk in and then beat the heat, hopefully.
How long are you going to exercise for?
We're going to walk the park, so usually it takes us about an hour or less to walk the...
About to come out, now that you're out in the air and everything, any advice for anybody who's thinking about exercising today like you?
Get out early, bring your water, and just take it easy.
And so as bad as today may already feel, there's many more even hotter days ahead, even hitting 100 this weekend. And so maybe a day off from exercise that day will be even the more healthy option for mind and body. What's your plan for the day now with this heat? How much are you gonna push it today?
A lot. Drink a lot of water. Get ready. We have a race this weekend, so.
You can't miss training.
Nope. It's supposed to be 101 too, so it's like.
And the weekend is going to be even worse than now.
Yeah, it usually is.
And it's better to, I guess, in your mind, in my mind, it would be better to train in this heat so you're used to it when a race day comes.
Yeah, I guess that would probably be a good idea.
But it's not good being out in this, is it?
No.
In Pensacola, Steve Keeley, Fox 29 News.
And more in local news this morning. Hahnemann University Hospital has released an official timeline for when all of its departments will close. And it all starts today with the emergency room. Fox 29's Lauren Johnson filed this report.
Hey, good morning to both of you. That's right. And shutting down an operation this massive really takes a lot of time. It's no easy undertaking. It's not going to happen overnight. So today begins a long journey in that process. Let's take a look at the timeline. At 7 o'clock today, admissions from the emergency room were shut down. Also, elective surgery cases and the inpatient operating room closed for non-emergency cases. Now, later this month on the 26th, endoscopy and colonoscopy services will end, as well as same-day surgeries. In August, the emergency room shuts its doors, and then on September 6th, the building itself will be closed for business. Yesterday, heartbroken nurses and staff members held a funeral march to mourn patient lives. They marched from the hospital to City Hall carrying signs and a coffin to represent that loss of lives, they say, will result from closing the doors here.
It's been really sad. People are sad. The doctors are sad. Students are very confused. It's very sad. That's the best word I can use for it. We can't imagine not being here.
Unfortunately, it's going to be that beginning process again where, you thought you were secure and you're not, and you have to unfortunately start over again.
I absolutely cannot imagine not coming here. It's all I've known. It was my first real job. It was my big girl job.
So a lot of people will be out of work, having to sort of figure things out when the hospital finally shuts down in September. And many people don't know this, but this hospital serves about 40,000 patients every year. The interim CEO says the decision to close Hahnemann was an extremely difficult but necessary one due to continuing unsustainable financial losses. So this ends an era in our city and the beginning of a lot of unrest for people who kind of don't know what's going to happen next. As we all know, change sometimes can be really tough.
And more in local news overnight. In Delaware County, a man was shot late last night in Chester. It happened on Highland Avenue just after 11. Fox 29 is told the man was shot twice inside of a home and his condition is unknown. As we learn more, we'll be sure to bring you the latest. And in Camden County, police need your help identifying a suspect accused of sexually assaulting a woman early yesterday morning. It happened around 4 a.m. on the 600 block of Kane Avenue in Camden. According to police, the victim had spent time with the suspect earlier in the evening prior to the assault. Police say the suspect is a black man between the ages of 30 and 40. Anyone with information is urged to contact police. And in Berks County, the mayor of Reading, Wally Scott, called off a ceremony to raise the rainbow pride flag over City Hall. The ceremony was supposed to happen Monday in honor of the city's pride festivities this week. The flag raising was canceled minutes before it was supposed to begin. It's being reported the mayor sees the pride flag as a political movement. The LGBT Center of Greater Reading is calling it blatant, unacceptable discrimination. There's now talk of a protest happening Monday, the day after Reading Pride ends. And today in Salem County, family and friends are holding a vigil to remember a 19-year-old shot and killed over the weekend. Jure Douglas was shot Sunday evening outside a home on Sinixon Street in Salem City. He was rushed to the hospital where he succumbed to his injuries. More than a dozen detectives have been working to try to figure out who shot Douglas, but so far no arrests have been made. Douglas was planning to attend Rowan University in the fall to study engineering. The vigil begins at 6:30 on that same street. And in Delaware County, 35-year-old Isaiah Gowdy has been sentenced to life in prison for the 2007 stabbing of Gary Jenkins. The stabbing occurred in Sharon Hill at Jenkins' home on Reese Street. But it wasn't until 2017, 10 years later, that Gowdy's DNA was linked to the stabbing. And in May, Gowdy was convicted of first-degree murder. Again, he has been sentenced to life in prison without parole. And in Delaware County, Upper Darby police confirmed that they have arrested a woman accused of setting a home on fire after she was evicted. Police say 29-year-old Tracy Davis turned herself in earlier this month. The homeowner told police Davis called them and admitting to setting the fire on North Keystone Avenue. Her preliminary court hearing is set for July 22nd. You see these two? Philadelphia police say they went into Target, hid while employees closed up the shop, and then hopped out and stole several items. Once on May 14th and then again last Sunday. Once the employees left, police say the suspects smashed several locked glass cabinets and filled several suitcases full of merchandise. If you recognize them, you are urged to contact police. Does this sketch look familiar? Spring Township Police in Berks County say a man who looks similar to this is wanted for burglary. Police say it happened Thursday just after noon on Buckman Avenue. However, they did not give any details about exactly what happened. And a great way to beat this heat is, of course, a pool, but a Philadelphia councilman says if you're going to swim, you need to follow the rules. City Councilman Bobby Heenan posted on Facebook over the week encouraging people to turn in neighbors who are ignoring the law, which states pools with more than 24 inches of water need a permit, and anything higher than 48 inches needs a 4-foot fence around it. One family Fox 29 spoke to got a letter from the city saying they have 5 days to remove the pool or face a fine of $150 to $2,000.
That's wrong. We have 6 kids in the house and we have nothing to do at home, so we just had to have a pool to have fun.
Part of the problem for families is the cost of fencing in the area is far more than the cost of the pools themselves. Fox 29 reached out to Councilman Bobby Heenan's office, but have yet to hear back. And the fallout continues in Washington this morning over President Trump's racist tweets directed at 4 congresswomen of color. Doug Luzader has the latest this morning from Washington.
Well, this vote was almost directly along party lines, but 4 Republicans did cross over.
The yeas are 240, the nays are 187. The resolution is adopted.
It sounded so routine, but it was anything but. The U.S. House voted to condemn what it called racist remarks from President Trump, who had tweeted that 4 freshman Democrats should go back to the places from which they came.
These comments from the White House are disgraceful and disgusting, and these comments are racist.
But the drama didn't stop there. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, in calling out the president, broke House rules by calling his remarks racist.
I made a point of order that the gentlewoman's unparliamentary and request they be taken down.
It got so heated that Democrat Emanuel Cleaver, who was presiding over the House, had enough.
We want to just fight. I abandon the chair.
He walked away, but the vote did eventually happen. Earlier, the White House had worked to shore up GOP support, with the president tweeting, "Those tweets were not racist. I don't have a racist bone in my body." But 4 Republicans did cross over to join every Democrat voting against the president, who is standing by his comments.
It's what they say about our country. It's my opinion they hate our country. And that's not good. It's not acceptable. Thank you very much, everybody.
And next up, the House will have to deal with yet another effort to impeach the president. In Washington, Doug Luzader, Fox News.
And more on Good Day Philadelphia this morning. Busch Beer has a latest on, and it involves a pop-up bar in the woods. We discussed this morning with Fox Business's Tracy Carrasco.
Now, what is this free beer for life thing by the Budweiser people? Is
Busch.
Well, does Budweiser still own Busch?
Anheuser-Busch?
I don't know.
Well,
I'm not sure. Good
Budweiser
question.
was created by a guy named August Busch.
Yeah.
That's why we call it Busch. So I don't know if the company still owns Busch.
Anheuser-Busch.
Anheuser-Busch. Well, we'll figure that out. What's the contest?
Yes, Busch Beer, they're hosting a pop-up shop, a pop-up bar, really, in the middle of a forest, except they're not telling you exactly where. So in the middle of maybe a national park or someplace like that, they want you to figure it out, and they're leaving clues on their Twitter page to help you do this, to lead you to this secret hidden bar that will be set up this Saturday, July 20th, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. local time, wherever that may be. And once you get there, they're going to be giving out free beer, free swag, and you'll be entered to win free beer for life. But of course, you just have to find it. So the first hint that they put up yesterday is that essentially the bar is in the USA, so that's good.
Well, is that true? You're
Could be
just
University of Arizona.
Could be. You're taking for granted that the blank is an S, right? Maybe that is the University of Arizona.
Possibly.
Alabama?
That would be an interesting guess.
Could it
but,
be?
I'm going with USA.
Well, you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Could it be Busch Gardens?
I don't know. Maybe.
Well, it seems like kind of an obvious place to put the Busch beer
It
contest.
has to be in a forest, though, and not necessarily an amusement park, unless they have like thicket groves of forest there. I mean, there are forests around that area.
Well, how in the heck am I going to have a chance to win this if I don't even know where it is in the United States?
Because they're going to keep putting out those
You gotta
Twitter
follow
clues.
their Twitter page.
Oh.
Every day, I think they'll put out a clue.
And then what? And it's actually a bar that I could walk into in the middle of a.
It's a pop-up shop, probably a pop-up type of a bar, very temporary. And yes, you can get free beer once you find it, free stuff, and enter to win that free beer for life.
All right. Tracy, are you a beer drinker?
Occasionally.
You seem more like
Not too often.
a Cosmo, something a little more sophisticated. I don't know.
I prefer wine over
See, yeah, there you go. Yeah,
hard alcohol.
I get that. We'll see you again tomorrow. So where in the heck could it be?
Thank you, Tracy. You have to wear one of those red flannel shirts when you go off in the woods, like that's what the guy's wearing in the video.
Down the stream.
Yeah, you need your flannel and probably a beard, I would think, in order to help find it.
And if you'd like it trimmed, come to 4th and Market.
Moving on to your Fox 29 Weather Authority. As we mentioned earlier, the Philadelphia area is slated for an aggressively hot Wednesday with an excessive heat warning in effect from today all the way through Sunday evening. Temperatures are expected to be in the 90s for the entirety of the week, even surpassing 100 degrees on Saturday. So be sure to drink lots of water, stay inside if you can, in air-conditioned rooms, and think about your furry friends as well. Here we have a look at current temperatures in our area. 79 degrees up in Mount Pocono, and already this morning 84 degrees in Lancaster, around the same here right in Philadelphia, and already up to 86 degrees down the shore in Wildwood, New Jersey. And looking ahead to our 7-day forecast, again, it's going to be a dangerously hot Wednesday with a high of about 95 degrees, and we are expecting some afternoon thunderstorms, which will give way to some showers and storms again on Thursday. And we cannot stress this enough, dangerous heat Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. By Monday of next week, we'll have a cooling off period of a mild 90 degrees. And don't forget to download the latest version of the Fox 29 Weather Authority app to have the latest forecast right at your fingertips. And we are going to switch gears and take you over to Washington, where a Senate committee is having a hearing over something we can all rally against: robocalls. Stay with us.
Help the elderly that's getting scammed outside of the families?
Well, I don't know that I can speak to that. I can tell you that within the telecommunications industry, I think we are seeing more and more and more support for identifying and highlighting and dealing with these VoIP providers that are the conduits for the call.
I think that would be wise for the telecommunications industry, because the middlemen distributing drugs that were knowledgeable of it are all getting sued in some form or another.
I think it's a great analogy that you brought up.
Have there been any civil or criminal cases filed against anybody within the telecommunications circuit, specifically the dozen or so VoIPs?
One of the things that has surprised me is that when the regulators have gone after the illegal robocallers, they go after what they call the callers, the scammers. And in fact, if you read the indictments and the other notices, they don't name who the VoIP providers are that enabled that to happen. Now we're seeing a shift. I have just this week been talking to enforcement authorities in this town, and they do have license revocation authority. They do have injunctive authority, and I am very
I haven't
hoping
used it.
I'm hoping that we start to see that happen.
So I'll finish with this. It's like many of the things I've been involved with here in a short time. It amazes me how the underlying industries have the knowledge, put up with it, gets to a committee hearing before anything gets done. I would say, like I've admonished the healthcare industry when it comes to fixing itself in general, the telecommunications industry and VoIP ought to be concerned. And it's surprising to me that they haven't been taken to task already. That's disappointing.
That they are concerned, and I think we are rallying the troops.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sinema.
Thank you, Chairman Collins, Ranking Member Casey, and all of our witnesses for being here today. Robocalls are the #1 consumer complaint that the Arizona Attorney General receives, and more than 550 million robocalls have been placed to Arizonans in just the first 6 months of 2019. But robocalls are more than just a nuisance, and while not every call is a scam, we must go after the criminals who use robocalls to harass seniors. For example, some criminals pose as utility bill collectors and threaten to shut off people's power in the dead of summer. In Arizona, where summer temperatures can easily top 110 degrees, that's a threat to a senior's health and well-being, and some do pay out of fear. I also heard from Maggie, who's here today, whose elderly parents in Tucson, Arizona, were robbed of their life savings in a sweepstakes scam. Maggie's father is a 20-year veteran of the United States Air Force, living with Alzheimer's, and has lost much of what his family saved from his military pension. Their story is horrifying, but all too common. And that's why I've worked with Chairman Collins to pass the Senior Safe Act into law last year, which empowers financial institutions to identify and stop financial exploitation before families like Maggie's lose everything. And I'm proud to join Chairman Collins in introducing new legislation this Congress, the Anti-Spoofing Penalties Modernization Act, that updates existing penalties for illegal spoofing that haven't changed since they first became law in 2010. Our bill also helps enforcement partners by extending the statute of limitations for these violations from 2 years to 3 years. There have been increasing reports of hospital systems getting inundated with thousands of robocalls a day, which jams their phone systems and puts lives in danger. I heard from a doctor in Scottsdale who's required to have her cell phone with her at all times. She worries that every wasted minute listening to an automated recording is a minute that's being taken from a patient or a medical emergency. This leads me to my first question to Mr. Frankel. What can businesses and organizations, especially those that serve vulnerable populations, do to combat these scams? And to what extent do you believe these types of scams that target hospitals or pretend to be from the law enforcement or from IRS impact public health and safety?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. I think whether it's a hospital or it's some other agency, I mean, these are all damaging, and the robocallers are indiscriminate in who they choose to target. It's just it's a fishing expedition for them to see what works. They trade stories amongst each other about what the most lucrative scam is, and if it turns out the scam of the week is to target hospitals, then that's what they're going to do. It absolutely impacts the institutions, and I think that again, as the recipients of those calls, their ability to mitigate that it's too far down the line to ask them to try to do that. We can make them cautious. We absolutely have to educate them, but we have to go back to the root cause. And in fact, I will tell you that I have spoken with a VoIP provider in Scottsdale who admitted to me that he was allowing 4 million calls a day onto our network from a customer of his in India, where all of those calls are spoofed. The Indian caller is claiming to be calling from the United States, and he is allowing this, and he is livid with me for calling him out on it. And he's told me he's not going to cooperate with me further, and that if I want to get more information from him, I can get a subpoena. And so, now I will chase down authorities who can do that. But there's no excuse for that.
My second question is also for you. Adam Dupay is an assistant professor in the School of Computing, Informatics, and Decision Systems Engineering at Arizona State University. Experts like Adam have called for a national effort to build a detailed map of the robocall ecosystem and have raised concerns about traceback and the new shake and stir protocols not being a silver bullet. In your experience, do you believe there will still be gaps in how we protect people from robocalls? And are there specific challenges in rural areas that depend on older legacy telecommunication systems?
So thank you for that. I do not believe that we will ever get this problem down to zero. The scammers are very clever, and we will need to have programs and systems in place that react to how they react to what we do. So it is a moving target, and we need to plan for that. That said, I think that there absolutely are things that we can do that will dramatically reduce and limit this. With respect to your question about rural communities, certainly with respect to shake and stir, call authentication technology, that is a new technology. It relies on new networks in order to work. And traditionally, and we know from the rural providers that they tend to be the last to upgrade their networks. So their ability to take advantage of that new technology and offer that new technology to their customers is some long way, years away. But these robocalls, these illegal robocalls, do not come into our network through rural carriers. They come into the network, as the diagram showed, way upstream from them. And if we stop them there, we will stop them for everybody. And they won't be able to reach urban dwellers, and they won't be able to reach, or they'll be at least very limited in their ability to reach rural customers as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator McSally.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I really appreciate you having this really important hearing today. It's impacting so many of all of our constituents around the country. And I do want to point out Maggie Dickens, who is here today. You can raise your hand, Maggie, and say hi. And her story of her parents that were robbed of nearly $750,000 because of these scams. And I want to share more of her story because I think it's so important as we look at this issue. The individuals who stole from her not only convinced them to wire the money, but trained her parents to wrap cash in magazines to send through the mail. They prepared scripts for them to read at banking institution to legitimize the need to send these thousands of dollars internationally. They impersonated her parents over the phone to the life insurance company, allowing them to cash in her parents' life insurance policies. When the criminals didn't get answers fast enough, and this, I'm reading your testimony from Maggie's parents, they sent taxi cabs to my parents' home to deliver messages and try and get my parents into the cabs. Additionally, the individuals instructed my mother to open multiple credit card accounts and advance cash and buy a large number of gift cards from retail stores, all of which were sent overseas. They're both elderly, and your father is at the beginning stages of Alzheimer's when all this happened. And he's a 20-year Air Force veteran. As they've gone through this experience and Maggie started, as you understood what happened, you think about how many people were touched just by what I just, how many people they interacted with through this whole process. It starts with a robocall, but then there's so many other people who are on the front lines of identifying that something not right is happening here, but nobody acted. And so we've had a lot of great discussion today about what more can be done. First, we got to stop with the robocall in the first place. But there were so many other indications that they were about to be robbed. What more can be done, Sheriff Sanders, what you've seen in your experience, to address this at the front lines of all these other people who were touched in the midst of this scam as their life savings were robbed? This is so tragic, and Angela, your story is similar, but it's happening everywhere. What else can we do, Sheriff?
Well, the typical answer would be more police. That's not the answer here. The answer is what we're doing now.
Awareness.
The answer is requiring the laws that are being proposed by Senator Casey to be passed so that the technological industry has some constraints and expectations, legal expectations that it has to live up to. It's everything that we're talking about. It's everything. It's family looking out for elderly relatives. It's friends looking out for elderly friends and making them aware of what we're aware of. Everyone here needs to be making this part of our daily routine dialogue when we come in contact with a senior. And they're coming at us in a technological way, but our response has to be
in the human way. Ms. DeLeon Cullen, you said that veterans are more likely to be scammed. Maggie's dad was a veteran, so can you elaborate more on this? As a veteran myself, this is deeply disturbing.
Yes, it is because the scammers, they're going to look onto victims that will provide a benefit to them through their schemes. So the veterans' benefits, it entices the scammers in order to obtain access to their information. In order to add to what Sheriff Sanders said, education is a great piece. We have to educate our veterans, their families, the same way that we have to educate the elderly, but it's very important that we educate the community as well as their families in order to be able to identify when one of our family members, elderly or a veteran, is being targeted. Another aspect that we have to look onto veterans is because they utilize emotion. So they know that the camaraderie within the veteran community is large. So when they entice them, they tell them that they're veterans as well. They come into conversation, scheming up situations where you are going to help other veterans, creating charities as well in order to help your brethren out. And that is how they entice veterans.
There is a special place in hell for people who are preying upon those who served and sacrificed for our country. We need to go after these people. But it starts with the phone call. I mean, I got a neighbor, she's in her 60s. She's pretty technologically savvy, and she all of a sudden is getting nonstop calls. Like, we don't know what shifted and what list she got on, but nonstop robocalls. And the technology's got to be there to stop it. I know we've talked about it. She's gone into the provider, and they're saying, well, you got to upgrade your phone if we're going to try something else on it. She doesn't have the ability to upgrade her phone. She can't afford to upgrade her phone. What else can we do, Mr. Frankel?
Well, I hate to sound like a broken record, Senator, but by the time the call gets to your neighbor and to her provider, it is lost in a sea of millions of other calls, many of which are legitimate. So identifying it at that point is very, very difficult for her provider. It needs, the stopping of the calls needs to move upstream to the point where that concentration of millions of illegal calls is coming into our network. That's the provider that has the ability to identify and stop the calls. And unlike the rest of the telecommunications community that is rallying and like you is livid about these calls, these guys are just asleep at the switch and letting it happen.
They need to do more. In fact, the guy there at the store said, well, I just ignore them when they come into... You can't ignore hundreds of calls every day, and you're missing out on loved ones and others. I know I'm way over my time. So thank you all for your testimony, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for describing Maggie's story as well. We appreciate that. Senator Jones.
Thank you, Chairman Collins, and also thank you, Chairman Collins, for all your leadership on this issue. It is so important as someone who has elderly parents, one of whom still lives by her telephone. It's really important. And I want to highlight something because one of the problems I see that we have is in the education, and we've talked about it, everybody's talked about it, and I want to come back. But when elderly folks get calls from someone who appears to be a legitimate law enforcement office or whatever, you can talk to them all day long. But if the sheriff calls, they're going to take that call. And recently, we had a constituent, and I think this is all important for us on this dais here, call us to tell us that they had gotten a call from Senator Jones's office checking up on their Social Security benefits, and they have to verify information about their Social Security number because they're that we've checked, and my office knew that they were about to lose their benefits if we didn't get their number and help them verify that. Now, that senior was smart enough to call our office and say, this is happening, so we're doing that. And we can talk about education a lot, and I agree, and I talk to my mom all the time about this. Where are our seniors, though, getting most of their information so that the education can be there? There are not that many of them out there that are watching C-SPAN today to watch this hearing. There's not many out there that are going to always read. My mom can't see good, so she gets something in the mail, she can't see it. Where are, Sheriff Stancy, I think you might can answer this better. When we're educating folks, where are they getting their information? Because it's a different generation that's not getting it all on their telephone or their iPad. They're looking at TV, they're listening to radio. Where can we do that? Where are they getting their information? And I'll leave it to anybody to answer that.
Mr. Jones, I believe one place that should be informing our seniors is places of worship. Many of our seniors attend regularly. And I think that the leaders in faith-based organizations should make this information available to our seniors.
Okay, Ms. Nancy, do you want to? Where's your grandmother getting her information?
I would say doctor's offices would be a good place. Any place, like you said, in church. Even with PSAs or other mailers that they can get, they do get a lot of mail, but things that can that are easy for them to understand and easy for them to read, I think would help. But doctors' offices, places of worship, all of those are really good places to reach our elderly.
Okay. Is it television? Or can the media companies help with this when they understand and know a scam? You report a scam. Can we tell the FCC or somebody to say, for God's sakes, do some public service announcements about this and not just do it on the nightly news because they don't always watch the nightly news? Would that help?
All of the above.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Frankel, let me follow up with you real quick because technology jumps way ahead quickly. And I think that the generation, my mother's generation now, and maybe mine, I'm 65, and so maybe even mine, they're not as always technologically savvy. But as our population ages and my children and those in the 50 or so range, they're going to know about this a lot better. They're going to be better educated, but there's going to be something else. What is it we've got to do to stay ahead of the game? What are we looking at in 5 years, 10 years down the road so that folks that are 50 years old now or 55 years old now who are pretty technologically savvy and they know when they get a call from the sheriff that they're going to come arrest them because they didn't pay a parking ticket, they know that that's a scam. But what's the next big thing here that we need to be looking at? How do we stay ahead of the game?
Well, sometimes I say, Senator, we need to think like a robocaller or think like a scammer. So, first of all, the stories we've heard, the scammers are employing a broader range of technologies. It may start with a robocall today. I think as long as the telephone is around, they're going to continue to use it. We've seen scams that originate in email. So that's an ongoing threat. But I think my prediction is that they are going to become more targeted. There's going to be more social engineering. We've got so much information about ourselves now out on the internet that it's very easy for a scammer to go and research all the details, and now you've gone and admitted exactly how old you are and who your parents are and so on, and they can go find all that information pretty quickly.
It's been out there for a long time anyway, so it's okay. But I get what you're saying.
But it's becoming more available and more detailed, and scammers are going to become more resourceful in using it to establish credibility and to perpetrate larger scams of larger scale, more damaging scams in a more targeted way. That's my prediction. I also think that it's going to move to businesses. So you're going to see, we've seen it a little bit, but there are businesses that have been bilked out of hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions through wire transfer scams and things like that, where people impersonate the CFO or the controller or the treasurer or something like that. And they can do that credibly because they've gone and gathered a lot of information on the internet. And then they use the telephone as an entry point.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for holding this hearing on such an important topic. And thanks to all of you for being here to discuss an issue that, unfortunately, affects all of us every day. You know, I served as the Attorney General of my state, and I can tell you that this was the top consumer complaint to my office by far. And just last year, 2018, we had nearly 50,000 complaints in the state of Missouri, 50,000 complaints of illegal telemarketing calls. And many of those came from residents who were signed up on the state's no-call list. As you can imagine, their incredible frustration to understand why in the world they're still getting these calls. As Attorney General, I joined a multi-state coalition of other attorneys general to seek ways to stop and reduce robocalls. And these fraudulent schemes are outrageous violations of privacy, I know firsthand, and frustrate and harm Missourians and Americans on a daily basis. Like many of my colleagues here on the committee, I was proud to co-sponsor the TRACED Act, which passed the Senate in May, and I'm proud to join Senator Collins on the Anti-Spoofing Penalties Modernization Act, which I hope will soon move forward, and I hope that both of these will make a real difference. Mr. Frankel, can I just start with you? I want to come back to the topic that Senator Sinema raised about rural communities. And looking at the stir-shaken authentication technology, a lot of rural carriers still use the legacy, and you were, I think, alluding to this with Senator Sinema, the legacy time division multiplexing TDM networks rather than the voice IP technology. And so am I right in thinking that the stir-shaken authentication technology can't be used by carriers that use TDM networks? Is that right?
In its present form, that's correct.
And can you just give us a brief description for the layperson as to why those two aren't compatible? Well, or why we should care about that, why that's a problem?
You shouldn't have to care about it. The industry should care about it for you. But in a brief explanation, the TDM technology dates back to the late 1970s, introduced, deployed largely in the early 1980s. It's the same reason that you can't run modern programs on a 20-year-old computer. I mean, these protocols don't work in that old technology. It's good enough to carry telephone calls, but it's not good enough to carry all of the signatures and the encryption data that is associated with this latest stir-shaken.
Got it. What are some other ways then, in your view, that we can protect rural residents and others who use carriers that rely on TDM networks? What can you mentioned stopping these calls up network. I mean, what are some things? What are some solutions for folks who use these networks that we can be pursuing?
Well, I really do believe stopping it up network where the calls do enter our U.S. telecom system, that is the right place to stop them. And that's not dependent on all of the technology down at the customer serving, the consumer serving level, be it rural or otherwise. That's dependent up higher in the system where we have a small number of providers through which the bulk of these calls come. That's where they should be stopped. And the providers down there at the consumer level, I think, should actually be demanding of the rest of the industry upstream, saying, don't send us this garbage. We will not accept it, and we require that you and the people upstream from you, everybody up the chain, needs to be responsible and needs to be diligent and do whatever it takes to stop those calls.
Are there policy steps that we can take, regulatory or otherwise, incentives that we can put in place to help stop these up network?
Well, I think there is certainly encouragement that you can provide to do that. Certainly, I also hear concerns from the industry. You know, we're a very litigious society, and so, for example, providers are concerned that, are we going to get in antitrust trouble if we all agree down at the customer serving level that we won't accept this garbage from up higher? Is somebody going to accuse us of colluding to stop robocalls? Now, I think that's ridiculous, and you're smiling, but I hear that. routinely from people. We need to be very careful what steps we take because we don't want to get in that kind of trouble. I will tell you that I went to a few, having identified a couple of these providers. I called them, engaged with them via email and telephone, say, please, can you stop? And what I got back from two of them was threats that they were going to sue me for fraud and harassment. Can you imagine these providers that are putting millions of calls, garbage calls on the network every day, are telling me that I am acting fraudulently and harassing them?
It's incredible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That is absolutely outrageous. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Madam Chair, for having this hearing. If this is the 5th hearing on robocalls since I've been in the United States Senate, it's probably the 150th. I was Attorney General of my state as well. This problem has been endemic as a consumer challenge for years and years. And the technology is there to stop these calls, correct? I don't see anyone disagreeing. It is there. I've introduced a measure called the Robocall Act, which would require telecom companies to verify caller ID and provide, here's the important part, provide free robocall blocking technology to consumers. We've taken action in the Commerce Committee to approve a measure. It's called the Trace Act. It's on the floor of the Senate now. But it still fails to require this technology, which is there, and it's been there for years, to be provided to consumers. Is there anyone here who opposes the Robocall Act? Or, to put it more positively, would all of you support a measure to provide this existing technology to consumers to block robocalls? And we're not talking about public service, your community's about to be flooded, or there's a criminal shooter in your midst. We're talking about commercial robocalls that are done to harass and exploit seniors and the rest of us. Anybody here who opposes it? Would everyone here support it?
Senator, if I may, I don't oppose the bill, but I have to tell you that the blocking technology at the terminating end of the call, where it is about to be delivered to the consumer, is trivially defeated by a robocaller.
Well, with the great scientific knowledge we have, and we're celebrating the Apollo anniversary, if we can put a man on the moon, can we defeat that kind of robocall ingenuity?
And that's absolutely what we have to do, but you have to recognize that for every phone call, that there's a point of origination and there's a point of termination. There's the caller and the called party. And if the caller's provider is complicit in the perpetration of these illegal calls, then at the terminating end, they are virtually helpless to do anything about it. So engaging the major providers to provide the best blocking technology they have isn't going to work if there's somebody at the originating end that is complicit in defeating that technology.
And what would be necessary in terms of technology to block that complicity?
Well, you have to hold those originating providers accountable for what they allow onto the network.
So you're suggesting that holding them accountable, holding them legally liable, would be the answer?
I think that would be helpful, yes.
And that should be part of the bill?
I'm not a law writer, but I think we should figure out, yes, how they are so obstinate, this handful. I think there are tools that exist today that we need to fully deploy to rein them in, and if to the extent that can be backstopped with legislation, I think we should be pursuing that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Chairman Collins and Ranking Member Casey, for doing this. Clearly in Florida, as Senator Rubio and I will testify, both of us have had plenty of phone calls from people that have been scammed. And we've got a lot of senior citizens in our state. And so, first of all, Ms. De Leon Colon, thank you for being from the great state of Florida. And what else can we be doing to just get the public? I mean, the best thing is that the public would know. I think we ought to pursue what Senator Blumenthal is talking about, what legislation we can do. But what should we be doing to get people more knowledgeable?
What the Postal Inspection Service is doing, we have compiled a series of public announcements that they are focused towards elderly, and they are provided across the nation. And we have actually collaborated as well with the National Center on Elder Abuse in order to prepare literature that will actually focus and speak to that senior citizen. So the information that they're receiving, it's good for them, and it's in a way that they can understand. And they're informed on how to avoid being targeted, also where to report and what to expect and what the trends are as well. We have national campaigns, National Consumer Protection Week, that we do in collaboration with our Federal Trade Commission, and we do that yearly. We go out to the post offices. We provide talks to our customers. We also have first line. If we have our clerks out there that have the interaction, and they usually know at those small post offices, they know their customers, and if they identify, they also speak to them as well. And also they call us. They know to call us. So education is key, and it's not just to the elderly community. It's society's responsibility. So we need to go, to those churches. We need to go to those doctors, medical facilities. We need to have those social workers aware. And law enforcement has to be a part of it. It's a holistic approach.
What percentage of, just take seniors in Florida as an example, what percentage of seniors in Florida do you think are aware of all the games, that how they can be taken advantage of?
I do not have that information. I would like to provide it to you at a later time.
Okay. Do you have any feel for? Are people getting more knowledgeable about it?
I think there is, and the way I believe people are getting more knowledge on it is that we're educating their family as well. So when we go visit our elder parents, we look through the mail. We tell them, look through the mail. Sometimes you're there, receive the phone calls. They do have to have their autonomy, but it's okay. They took care of us. It's our turn to take care of them. So it's actually letting society know that it's society's responsibility. It's not just the elderly's responsibility to take care of themselves. So I believe that has helped put the message out there. Also, legislation, the cases that we're working, collaboration within the state, local, and international authorities helps as well, has helped shine a light on this issue.
Thank you. Sir Sanders, what have you been able to do that's worked in your area to get, takes whatever group, but seniors more knowledgeable about what's going on?
Community affairs. Going out to the public arena in terms of senior centers. We schedule with their directors to appear and give advisories on this. We also put out public information articles about web scammers. And we also ask for suggestions as to what more we can do, because all of us, if we invite comments such as you're doing today, we're collectively stronger. So in my office, we ask for suggestions as to what more we can do.
Ms. Stanczyk, what have you? You've been trying to make people more aware because of what happened to your grandmother. First off, my heart goes out, to that. What do you think has worked the best, as you've watched what's gone around the country?
I'm not an expert. I can only speak from my grandmother's situation. I wish that there would have been more things in place to alert her. I know so many people that this has happened to now. I mentioned in my testimony, I know some very close family friends who are victims of the grandparent scam, and I wish that I would have reached out to them more to explain to them the way that these criminals are reaching out to them. They lost, I believe, $4,000 through this scam, and they live on a fixed income, and this really hurt them. I tell everyone I know, when I hear of a new scam, I call my parents, I tell them. I live in a very rural area, but everyone that'll listen, I tell.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Chairman Collins.
Thank you very much, Senator Scott. Senator Rosen.
Thank you for bringing this very important hearing. I actually...
And that is going to do it for us today at Fox 29's News Now. Be sure to catch us again tomorrow, same time, same place, 10 a.m. And be sure to follow Fox 29 at fox29.com, as well as our mobile app, and across social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thank you for joining us.